magical, magnificent Monday. My name is Paul Hutchings, dialing in from beautiful Southeast Idaho. It is May 13th, 2013. You are on the Think and Grow Rich call, my friends, and I'll tell you what, I don't know if you guys could feel the energy, could feel the excitement as we heard entrepreneurs dialing in from all over the world. But I'll tell you what, it was a little bit extra this morning. There was something a little bit more electric than usual. I don't know if you could feel that, but I'll tell you what, I could, and I'm excited about it. I have a feeling we're going to have an amazing call today. And before I kind of get the call started, I wanted to do just a quick mic check. Is Greg on the line?
I am on the line and fired up and ready to rock and roll.
Awesome, Greg. Awesome. Well, great. Fantastic. So glad you're here. So, my friends, I wanted to do just a quick little introduction. First of all, I wanted to welcome everyone here to the call today. As I mentioned, this is the Think and Grow Rich call. We're going to have an amazing call today. We come together as entrepreneurs scattered all throughout the world on a daily basis, Monday through Friday, every single weekday morning at this time to learn and grow and mastermind around the principles of the book Think and Grow Rich, my friends. And I'll tell you what, we've seen some amazing things happen. And what I wanted to do this morning to kind of get the call started off is just kind of take you back in time a little bit, back to 3 years ago. As a matter of fact, next month, June of 2013 will be the 3-year anniversary from when my life completely turned around. And I wanted to just tell you a quick little story, and then I'm going to introduce our amazing special guest today. And we're going to jump into perhaps this could be one of the best calls we've ever had. So I want to encourage everyone on the line, if you're at a spot where you can pull out something to write with, I would encourage you to get out a piece of paper, something to take some notes with. And if you're in the gym, like I heard many people dialing in from the gym, you're just going to have to listen and maybe catch the replay. So 3 years ago, my friends, 3 years ago, I was living in a 1984 single-wide trailer house with my wife and my 3 little boys. I had quit my job 6 months prior to this point. So I was jobless. I had a few $100s a month coming into my bank account, and I was literally in a position where something had to happen and something had to happen fast. And I remember one point in time, I actually, in fact, just a little extra piece of the story. There I was living in this trailer house. My business wasn't working. I had been through about 14 different network marketing companies. Income had actually gone down from when I quit my job. And I remember one time sitting in my little office in that 1984 single-wide trailer house, and I remember hearing my wife come home from the doctor's appointment from our third son. Our third son was born in December of 2009, and my wife had taken him to his checkup. It was January, thereabouts of 2010, and she comes home. I hear the door open. I hear her walk into the living room. And I get up and I walk out into the living room, and I see my wife in tears. And I walk out in the living room and I say, "Hey, honey, what's wrong?" And she proceeds to tell me that our third son, Kyson, has a condition called craniosynostosis, which basically means the bones in his head are fused together. And this is going to require a $50,000 surgery down at Primary Children's Hospital. And she was just, beside herself. And there I was, trying to make it as a husband and a father, and things weren't working. And what did I do? I embraced my wife, both of us in tears, and I said, "Honey, it's going to be okay." But the truth of the matter was, I didn't really know that it was going to be okay. I said what I had to say as a husband. I said what I had to say as a father. I said what I had to say as the leader of that family. But I literally didn't know if it was going to be okay, because things that I were doing for the past 6 years, businesses that I was doing, strategies that I was endeavoring to implement, they weren't working. Where had they gotten me? They had gotten me broke, jobless, and I was at a point where I needed some answers. And long story short, one night I said a prayer there at the side of my 2 youngest sons' bed. I'd read them their bedtime stories. They'd gone to sleep. I knelt down and I basically said a prayer. Just sometimes have you ever been at a point where you feel like you've been doing everything you could possibly do and things just still aren't working? Well, that's where I was. And so the thing that I thought to do was, gosh, maybe God can give me an answer. So I prayed. Long story short, I felt prompted to begin a serious study of the book Think and Grow Rich, a serious study. So I started studying. When Dr. Napoleon Hill told me to do something, I'd fold down the corner of the page and I would do it. And you know what happened? Over the next year, magic started to happen in my life. The right business was attracted into my life. The right mentor at that point in my life was attracted into my life. My income started to increase. As a matter of fact, I was just thinking about this morning in the gym. From June of 2010, when I began this serious study of the book Think and Grow Rich, until today, my income has increased by 22 times in this three-year period, right? So it's been amazing for me, and what's been furthermore amazing to me is to see, as we've been doing this every day and studying this book and studying these timeless principles and these laws, to see the magic happen in other people's lives as people plug in, as people begin to study the book in a serious way, as people begin to apply the principles in their lives. We've seen incomes go up tremendously. We have a group of people on the line who are earning over six figures on a monthly basis, who a couple of years ago had a hard time maintaining a $3,000 monthly income. We've got people on this line who are millionaires in their traditional businesses who come to this call to learn and to grow. We've seen people lose weight. We've seen people stop smoking. We've seen literally magic happen in many, many lives throughout the world as we have endeavored to be practitioners of this book, Think and Grow Rich. And that's a word, if you haven't heard that yet, that's a word that we use on this time from time to time, because it describes what we like to call ourselves, or describes what we endeavor to be, which is a practitioner. We're not those people who maybe were like I was the first 6 years of my economic career, where I read the book and I tossed it aside and I started on the next book. No, we are practitioners. Every day we repeat our major definite purpose. Every day we repeat our self-confidence formula. Every day we study these laws and principles, because we just don't know them all yet, right? And we want to continue to study and grow and learn and become the best that we can possibly be. So here we are now 3 years later. We've got, on average, between 350 to 400 entrepreneurs dialing in from throughout the world live every day, being practitioners, my friends, loving life, being grateful for life, loving this gift, loving this journey that we all have, and endeavoring to practice these principles on a daily basis moving forward. And I'll tell you, one of those mastermind callers, a lady, a very special lady by the name of Denise Bowdler from San Diego, she has done something very, very special for all of us. She's responsible, or partly responsible, for the call that we're going to have today, and we're going to get to that real fast, so just please hang tight with me for just another couple of minutes. I've got to share with you just a little bit more of the backstory to this call. So a couple of months ago, as you know, we're students of Dr. Napoleon Hill, and we learned that there was a book that came out a while back that had been sort of not necessarily suppressed, but kind of kept back from the public eye for quite a number of years. It was a book called Outwitting the Devil. And we learned about this book. Todd Young, actually, from Baltimore, Maryland, first told me about it, and I was like, what? There's a book that Dr. Napoleon Hill wrote that I didn't know about? So I ran out and I bought the book, and many of us, bought the book, and we're studying it, and I'm studying this book, and one of the thoughts that comes to my mind as I'm being fascinated by these things that I'm reading, and as I'm being lifted to a higher level, as I'm, just studying Napoleon Hill and his words and his insights from a standpoint that I hadn't studied them before in this new book, I said to myself, what would be amazing is if somehow I could get into touch with someone who had something to do with the Napoleon Hill Foundation, and what if I could get access to some of these archives of this stuff that Napoleon Hill has done, that the other stuff that's never been released, and specifically I'm reading Outwitting the Devil, and it's been edited and it's been shortened down from its original version. So I have this thought, I'm like, what if we could get in touch with someone that could maybe bring us some of that other information? So I had that thought, and then a short time after I had that thought, I was talking to Denise, and Denise is like, hey, Paul, you'll never guess, I ran into this amazing guy named Reid over here in San Diego. He's being called the Napoleon Hill of our time. He's, has ties with the Napoleon Hill Foundation. He's written this book entitled 3 Feet from Gold, co-authored with Sharon Lechter, and I'm going to go to this event. And I'm like, no way. And I'm like, hey, Denise, I don't know if there's any way, but when you go, maybe try to connect with them and see if you could maybe get access to some of this stuff that we don't have access to. And for whatever reason, she wasn't able to make it to that event. But you know what? We kept moving on, and then last week, I was sitting in my office, my home office, and I was thinking to myself, how can we do a better job of serving our existing community, and how can we do a better job of getting this call out to more people? Because, we know that this message changes lives, right? Selecting your purpose, building your desire, having persistence, this whole philosophy that we live by on a daily basis. So I'm thinking, how can we do a better job of getting this out? So I start to mastermind with myself. I pull out some sheets of paper, and I start to write down all these different ideas. And one of the ideas I wrote was, well, maybe we could connect with people of influence who have maybe dedicated their lives to getting this philosophy out, and we could maybe get them on a call and pick their brains, and maybe if they saw value in the call, they could share it with people from time to time as they're out there endeavoring to get this message out and support people in their study of it. And the very next day, in fact, it might even have been the very day, my friends, the very day. We talk from time to time on this call about how there are no accidents, only divine appointments we set for ourselves, or cosmic appointments, if you prefer that term. As a matter of fact, I was sitting in church yesterday, and someone said that. He says, there's no such thing as coincidence. Well, that very day that I had written that down on that piece of paper, or at least the next day, Denise calls me up, and she's like, Paul, you'll never believe this. And I was like, what, Denise? And she's like, I actually talked to Greg Reid, author of 3 Feet from Gold, and I told him about the call, and he said that he would be open to maybe connecting on the phone with you. And I was like, no way. So I said, yeah, go ahead and set it up. So we got on this phone call within probably the next couple of days of that little experience, and we had just a very nice conversation where Greg was asking us about the call and asking us about, our intention and the heart, and, are we doing this call just to make a profit off of a bunch of people, or do we really have the intention to help people? And I was kind of listening to Greg, kind of with the same thoughts in my mind, trying to figure out, hey, does this guy have a good heart? Is he really trying to serve people? And I want to tell you just one of the things that I remember from that initial conversation. Then we're going to bring him out and pick his brain. We're going to get to him real fast because he's just a literal goldmine of information. So we're having this conversation on the phone, and one of the things that Greg said to me and to Denise in that conversation is he says, well, hey guys, how can I serve you? How can I be of service to you? And I was like, wow, what a great indication that this man is living by the Think and Grow Rich philosophy. And we know Dr. Napoleon Hill teaches us the habit of going above and beyond and performing more service than is required, and the QQS formula, quantity, quality, and service, right? We know all this stuff, and I hear this guy say, how can I be of service to you? And that set me back, because I knew, right when he said that, I knew that this guy's heart is in the right place. He's a practitioner of the philosophy that we all practice on a daily basis. He's endeavoring to serve people the best way that he possibly can. And I'll tell you what else about this guy that I believe is 100% true. He is an ambassador of the philosophy that we study on a daily basis and that we endeavor to be ambassadors of, my friends. What is an ambassador? Someone who has developed themselves to a point where their communication is right, their heart is right, and they have the ability to go out and influence many, many, many people to change lives and to live a better way. And I asked Greg, I said, well, would you mind coming on our call and just kind of sharing with us what you know and what you've learned? He said, I would love to. And it's 6 a.m. in California, so I don't know, Greg, if you get up this early every day or you're just doing it special for us, but I just wanted to say we are so grateful. We are so glad that there's a guy like you in the world who's out there doing such a great job getting this information out into the public, and B, that you'd be willing to take some time and come into our Think and Grow Rich family and share with us. So, Greg, are you there, my friend?
I am, and thank you so much for having me. Actually, I'm not used to getting up this quite early. However, it was so interesting what you said about taking notes. Last night, coincidentally, the Napoleon Hill Foundation had their annual board meeting right here in San Diego. And we were out to dinner last night with the president, the CEO, the executive director, even Napoleon Hill's nephew, the chairman of the board. And we were sitting around having dinner, and I asked everyone, I go, one of the common denominators I want to know of all of you, are you great note takers? 100% of them reached into their coat pocket and pulled out 3x5 index cards, and every single one of them showed them to me. And they all were avid note takers. No matter where they go, what they say, if they get a little nugget of inspiration, they jot it down so they can refer to it back later on. So I just thought that was cool that you mentioned it at the first top of the call.
Wow, that's amazing. That's just fascinating. Well, Greg, we'd like to get to know you a little bit. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about, where do you come from? Where did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about your path in life that's gotten you to where you're at now.
I'm a blessed, lucky guy. So I'm just going to go with this. Advertising industry for 20 years. But that's business stuff. The main thing that probably makes up who I am today for people that know me is I'm a new father, I'm a new husband, and I'm truly enjoying, like you said, living the principles of Napoleon Hill, of the success philosophy. Rather than going out and just teaching it and talking about it, it's living, embracing, and becoming these principles so that you become, more of a attraction to people where they want what you're like. They want the lifestyle. They want the attitude. So they ask you, how do you keep that energy going, Paul? What do you do to get that, fired up feeling all the time? And by doing that, by living that message, then all of a sudden people will aspire to have the same for their own lives, which I got to give you so many props for what you're doing right here, brother. Very, very cool.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And, you touched on something that is so important that I think all of us understand, and that is there's a difference between knowing and living, and you really don't know something unless you're living it. And a lot of times people think, oh yeah, I've read the book or I've read it a few times, but the question is, are you living it? And I've been studying this for 3 years now, every single day, and I can tell you I'm not living it to the fullest. There's a lot I still don't know, and I'm still working on it. So it's really amazing.
That was a good word, though, the knowing. For people that don't know who I am, which pretty much probably this whole call, my name is Greg Reid. Hi, everybody. I'm a best-selling author, speaker, filmmaker right here in the beautiful streets of San Diego, California. And what happened, my little way that this happened with Napoleon Hill Foundation is in 1908, as everyone knows, Napoleon Hill was gifted a letter by the richest man of the world, Andrew Carnegie. And from that meeting, he was able to meet the most powerful and successful people of that generation and write the Bible of personal development, which we know is Think and Grow Rich. 100 years later, in 2008, the Napoleon Hill Foundation, president and CEO and family, wrote a very similar letter that Carnegie wrote to Napoleon Hill, and they gifted it to me. And they gave me an opportunity to follow in this gentleman's footsteps exactly 100 years later. So I've been dedicating my life towards traveling the world, meeting the most powerful and influential people of today's era, and finding the common denominators, the common themes that have driven people toward a life of personal sustained abundance. And, what we did, the 3 Feet from Gold project came to be, is because when they said go out and do a project, I said, great, but I could not relate to a billion-dollar success story in 2007 and 2008. I mean, come on, the economy was horrible. So I could relate to quitting. I could relate to throwing in the towel from time to time. So I said, hey, can we take the very first chapter where, they're talked about Are You Darby giving up on the gold mine just 3 feet away, and go out and interview today's thought leaders and ask them why they didn't give up on the vein of gold. And from there, we sat down with everyone from the gentleman who invented string theory to the president of NASCAR, from Miss America to Mrs. Fields Cookies, and we found what they did to persevere through the most challenging moments. And that's how this whole thing began.
And what were some of those things, if you don't mind sharing with us, that, some of the things you learned, some of the things that they did?
With the first interview I did was a guy named Dave Lineker. And a lot of people don't know him, his name, but you'll know the business he started. He wanted to get into real estate back in 1970. I go, Dave, what was it like? And he goes, man, it was brutal. He says, all the investment money ran out. And I go, well, how'd you handle it? He goes, let me explain. For 2 years, every phone call that came in was from a bill collector. I was so embarrassed when the phone would ring, I'd run across the hall and pick up the phone so my secretary wasn't put on the spot. The 3rd year, they threw me in jail. They called me a liar and a fraud. I said, well, what did you do? And he says, I took my attitude from trying to prove them wrong to something very important and proved myself right. I knew I wasn't the person they were making me out to be. He said, I had the courage to pick up the phone, call every bill collector and says, look, I don't got 50 grand I owe you. I'm sorry, but I got $50. I'll send it to you today with a promise that I won't quit. Don't give up on me. He says, I called every bill collector every single month until the fourth year. Someone finally believed in my dream, bought the first business, and that's called Remax Real Estate Corporation. And he says, I'm nothing. He goes, but how many people's lives have changed because I didn't give up on my dream? And how do we know that someone listening to this call right now, Paul, might be willing to throw in the towel because Visa's calling him on the other line? And the whole thing is what you said before, is to find your knowing. Find something in your heart, not what you believe, you wish, you hope. Find your knowing, what you know the true north is, and then never let other people talk you out of it.
Wow, that's so powerful. And I remember actually that interview. You've got a video, a film actually, an hour-long film that kind of documents the project, the 3 Feet from Gold project. And I remember that interview with Dave, the founder of Remax Realty. And I remember at one point in the conversation you said, how did you get through it? And he said something that shouldn't be shocking to anyone on the line, but he actually said, "Think and Grow Rich," right? He was a student of the book. You remember that?
Well, every single person I interview is a fan and a disciple of Think and Grow Rich. I mean, we've, after 3 Feet from Gold, had this great success. The Napoleon Hill Foundation, by the way, that book, 3 Feet from Gold, was the first book in the history of the world that Barnes and Noble bookstores actually bought the rights to and published through their sister company. So it's now featured in every bookstore, obviously worldwide, at all the Barnes and Nobles. Well, what happened is Don Green, president and CEO of Napoleon Hill Foundation, went in the back archives and found vintage home video of W. Clement Stone and Napoleon Hill before we were born. This black and white home video. So I digitized it, made a new project. So I introduced Stone, who brings on Hill. And then what they do is talk about the success principles in their own terms, their own voice. And then I put a mastermind of people, Brian Tracy, Les Brown, Mark Victor Hansen, Bob Proctor, all the cast of characters in one place, and they mastermind, just like this group call, of how those philosophies have stood the test of time. And I got to tell you, it's just so amazing to go back in the archives and dig through these boxes and find all these amazing principles. And just recently, I've got a book coming out in October called Think and Grow Rich, Stickability, The Power of Perseverance, where they found an audio program from 1942 where Napoleon Hill is being interviewed saying, I know I spend my life talking about success, but I got to talk about the 3 causes of failure. He says, you can do whatever and be successful. He goes, but if you do these 3 things, you're guaranteed to fail. And he flipped it on us. And that's like you were talking about earlier about the manuscript of Outwitting the Devil. He wrote that in 1939, and it just sat on the back shelves until the chairman and board of directors finally pulled it off and says, you know what, it's time. Because Napoleon Hill's own family did not want that book being released because he mentions the devil, and they did not want to, tarnish the brand of Napoleon Hill. But as you read that book, you realize he wasn't really glorifying Satan or anything like that. He was talking how he could trick the devils of our own mind into teaching us and stopping us from getting what we personally want to achieve in our lives. And the whole idea is if you could get into the mind of someone who is tricking you, then you could have control, and you could take control of your own life as well.
Wow. What's the name of that project you were telling us about, that where you organized, all the archives and put them together? Is that for sale? Is that out there somewhere?
Yeah, it's called Napoleon Hill Road to Riches. Napoleon Hill's Road to Riches. You can go on to Amazon. Speaking of that, Amazon kind of got jealous after we did the Barnes & Noble one, I guess. So their sister company, Brilliance Audio, this is the first program that they bought the rights to as well. So it's interesting. One of the interviews I did with along the journey was a guy named Jack Mates. And Jack is a guy who started a little company called Velcro, right? Changed our whole world. And I said, how did you sell 5 billion people Velcro? And he goes, I didn't. He goes, I just sold 5 people. I go, what do you mean? He goes, I sold the head of automotive industry, head of aerospace, head of medical, head of fashion. They found the application, and they brought it to the world. He goes, the whole secret of success isn't to go out and sell individual pieces or you'll be there all day. What you do is corner a market and let them do all the heavy lifting. And so for ourselves, by doing that same relationship with Barnes & Noble, well, guess what? The distribution now is in place for the rest of our life. They're on the bookshelves. Same thing with Amazon. Same thing with the new project. That is the secret of all success. I mean, if I went out and tried to sell 1,000 books to one person, 1,000 people, that's a lot of work. But just one little promotion from Amazon.com does that in an instant. And that is the true secret of personal achievement. It's all about leverage.
Leverage, definitely one of the things that all wealthy people know and understand and strive to apply in their lives. And as a matter of fact, I wanted to ask you, Craig, one of the things that we try to remind ourselves of here on this call on a daily basis is this idea that all wealthy people think in a certain way. You know, to kind of quote Wallace Wattles, they think in a certain way and they act in a certain way. As you have gone out and met with extremely wealthy people, right? I mean, you've met with some of the wealthiest people on planet Earth. Would you say that that's a true statement, that there are some similarities and some commonalities to their thinking processes?
Well, absolutely. And I also realize that even the rocket scientists aren't rocket scientists. I mean, everyone's the same. And that's the biggest takeaway I think I've got. I mean, I sat down with billionaires to scientists to Nobel laureates to all these incredible people, and people are just people. And that's one of the neatest things about this journey. And you know what? Every single one of them at one time or another were faced with a line in the sand, literally, where they thought about going to the bank, pulling out all their money, filling up the gas tank, and taking off. I mean, everyone is faced with that. And it's when you're faced to that wall is where you put your feet to the fire and you're tested. And that's, again, back to outwitting the devil. That's what it's all about. And the whole idea is to, I'm scared, you're scared, we're all scared, but successful people act in spite of that fear. They walk through it. And that was one of the common denominators. And it was also interesting to watch some of the things that successful people did. I mean, one of my favorite interviews was this guy named Truett Cathy. And he started a company you guys all probably heard of called Chick-fil-A restaurants in America. And, these are very, very successful things. He's a billionaire, the whole bit. And I said, what makes you so smart? What makes you so brilliant? And he says, I do something like a mountain climber. And he pointed to the wall, and he had a picture of a mountain climber on the side. I said, well, what's that? He says, well, most entrepreneurs are mountain climbers. They're willing to risk. And what they do is they start shimmying up the side of the mountain, but understand that majority of all businesses have setbacks or they fail. And he goes, what happens is the general guy will fall all the way to the bottom and go to their demise. He goes, for myself, a smart mountain climber goes about 20 feet, and he locks himself off. And he goes 20 feet, and he ties himself off. And he goes, when he gets a couple hundred feet up and he has a slip, he only falls about 10 feet and he regains his strength. He goes, where a normal entrepreneur will let themselves go all the way to the bottom without a safety net, I understood the power of making sure I gave myself a net, a safety thing, all the way up. I went, holy smokes. So everyone I started interviewing, the most successful, the most financially stable people I met, they all did that one common denominator.
Wow. So, like, an application of that maybe would be to, make sure you have a cash reserve, make sure you're paying off debt, kind of things like that.
Absolutely, and it's also like, Sharon Lechter. I mean, she's such a great advocate. She does this program called Pay Your Family First. You'll pay yourself first, and she says pay your family first. And when you're taking care of your family, your foundation is strong, then everything else you can build off. But if you're sitting there scribbling and doing whatever you can just to keep the creditors at bay or whatever you got to do, it goes, well, then you're always going from behind. So make sure you're always taking care of yourself, because business will have ups and downs. You don't want to rely on that. You want to rely that you're always just chipping away at it, so you've always got that safety line. And, it's so interesting. Going around interviewing all these amazing people, another common denominator is they did not quit when everyone else said they were crazy. I love that one, because so many people try to talk you out of your dreams. And the guy who invented string theory, his name's John Schwartz. String theory, just so people that don't know, Albert Einstein on his deathbed was trying to figure out one theory for how everything is connected. Everything is one. And they said, well, an atom is the smallest structure until you cut it in half and made fission. And he goes, something's even smaller is a thing called a quark. and holds corks together are these invisible strings, kind of like cheesecloth, and they resonate like a guitar string, and that's what's called energy. So if we're at a football game and everyone's applauding, you feel that energy because it's all interwoven. But for 10 years, John Schwartz was considered crazy. How could you invent string theory when Albert Einstein couldn't? For 10 years, he was shunned by his family, his friends, his peers, until Dr. Michael Green proves his theory to be the most accurate, and now John Schwartz is the father of string theory and considered the new Albert Einstein of our time. And I said, why in the world would you not quit for 10 years when everyone said you were crazy? And he looks at me and said, I knew I was right. And he goes, the secret of success for me is to not let other people talk you out what you know to be true. And he gave me the greatest wisdom of all the interviews I ever did. He said, successful people seek something called counsel, where failures listen to opinion. And I said, what's the difference? And he says, opinion is based on ignorance, lack of knowledge, inexperience. They've never done it themselves. He goes, counsel is based on wisdom, knowledge, experience, mentorship, because they've already paved the way. If you go to someone who's never written a book and say, hey, I'm going to go write a book, they might say, you can't do that. Why not? I don't know, you just can't. Well, that's their opinion because they've never done it. If I go to Mark Victor Hansen, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, and say, Mark, I'm going to write a book, he's going to say, great, but before you get started, here's what you need to know. And he's going to offer counsel based on wisdom, knowledge, and experience. He's already done it. John Schwartz said if we would spend our daily lives, our daily activities, only seeking counsel and ignoring people's opinions, our lives would change that moment.
That is so powerful. So powerful, and especially applicable. A lot of people on this call are in the home business profession, and one of the challenges that sometimes people go through is, they'll talk to a friend or a family member about their business, and many of them are negative. And what you just shared really clears it up. That those are opinions. We're taking advice from people who have no knowledge on the subject. It's like there's that quote in The Laws of Success where Dr. Hill says, who is he to judge your ability, and what great achievement has he to his credit? Who is he to tell you it can be done, and what great achievement has he to his credit that qualifies him to judge your ability? Seek expert counsel.
You're absolutely in The Road to Riches. He actually goes off on this. Actually, he sits there and says, "Look," he goes, "I don't take people's opinions for anything." He goes, when people offer their insights, I say, thank you very much. What gains you the access to give this to me, and also what gives you the authority to be sharing it? And then based on that answer is whether he listened to it or applied it or not. And, going around and meeting all these incredible people, I also realized that, there's a big difference between not giving up and also knowing when to throw in the towel. And there is a difference. The new book that I got coming out in October, it's called Stickability. And in the very first interview, I saw this guy on 60 Minutes. And I go, man, I got to meet that guy. 2 days later, I'm in his office. His name's Marty Cooper. And Marty invented something that you use every day, and you're probably talking to it right now. It's called the cellular phone. So the guy who actually invented the cell phone and changed our entire communication world, right? And I said, what does stickability mean to you? He said something brilliant. He goes, stickability has to be parallel with an equal, more important word called flexibility. He goes, if you're not willing to adapt, if you're not willing to adjust, you'll end up just being stuck. And he told this story about a spider monkey. He said, a spider monkey in the rainforest is the most quick, nimble creature in the world. You can't harpoon it, spear it, catch it. It's just too quick. But one hunter came up with a solution. They took a giant, heavy log and drilled a tiny little hole inside. They left the log at the base of the jungle and dropped a peanut in that little hole. The monkey would smell it from the treetop and come down from the treetops, and they'd go and reach their hand inside that log and grab a hold of that nut. Well, their fist would become so big it couldn't pull it back out and become stuck in that log. Now, all he's got to do is let go of that nut and pull his hand out, but he thinks that nut is saving it. Well, the hunters just come by about an hour later, knock the spider monkey out over the head with a rock and put him in a bag and capture the elusive spider monkey. Now, how many times have we or someone we know held on to our own nut, whether it's a house or a relationship car or guilt or remorse or fear, and we think that it's saving us, but ultimately, just like that spider monkey, it's leading to our demise.
Such an important concept, and in the book Think and Grow Rich, it's easy to get confused because we learn about how important persistence is and decision. There's those stories about Henry Ford of just being, almost to the point of obstinate. I think Napoleon Hill uses that word to describe him, and we need to make sure we don't get confused on what that means. A lot of times. We talk about on this call, there are things that you should be 100% firm and unshakable in, and then there are things that, you should be flexible in. And one of the things that we talk about being firm in is your vision, your dreams, your end result, where you're going. Don't let anyone talk you out of that stuff, but the strategies along the way will, and inevitably they'll change, right? You never get to where you're going in the exact way that you think you're gonna get there. And that actually reminded me of one of those other interviews you did where someone said something interesting about planning. Do you remember that? I think it was the Chick-fil-A guy.
Yeah, it was. It was Truett Cathy. I said, what makes you so special, and what could I do differently so I could have that same success? And he looked at me and said, don't plan. I said, well, that goes against everything we know, believe, have taught. And he goes, well, last year you made a lot of plans. I go, yeah. And he goes, how did those work out for you? I go and did it. And he goes, 5 years ago you had a master plan. And he goes, how did that work out? And I go, not at all. He goes, you might hit a goal from time to time, but I guarantee how it came to fruition didn't go as expected. He goes, the secret for me is to look for something called unexpected opportunity. I says, what's that? He goes, well, let's say I want to leave my house and I want to walk to the end of the street. He goes, that's my goal. I have to have a crystal clear picture of what it is I want. He goes, where a planner is going to plan every step, or you're going to pause, take a break, that's their destiny. I'm going to look for opportunity. I go, well, explain. He goes, well, I get off my backside and I'll start moving. I'll start walking towards the end of the street. He goes, but along my journey, I'm going to look for a skateboard or a bicycle and see if a kid lifts something out so I can make my journey shorter. He goes, if I get real lucky, I'll wave down a neighbor and I'll hitch a ride to the end of the street. He goes, either way, I'll get there. I'm just not so caught up in exactly how it's going to happen. And by the way, I'm going to share with you guys something that none of you have ever heard. This new vintage video and audio I just got from Napoleon Hill. He talks about a story about his good friend, Henry Ford. And I'll share something with you that probably no one has ever heard before if you guys want to hear it before it's published. You guys want to hear it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, he was talking to Henry Ford, and he says, tell me how this all came to be. I mean, how did you grow your business so exponentially? And we all know about the production line. We all know about all the cliche V8 boards, can't, all that crap. He says, but here's the thing that people don't understand. He says, when the cars were coming off the assembly line, they couldn't figure out how they're going to keep up with all the demand. So what do you mean? He goes, well, there had to be service stations. And he says there had to be freeways laid. There had to be dealerships. There had to be mechanic shops. He goes, all this infrastructure we really never planned. And he says, we had no idea the success. He goes, so we had to come up with a solution. And so what happened is they took the top 100 men from the line, and they says, you know what, you are the brightest, most agile and trainable people we've got. And what we're going to do is give you an opportunity of a lifetime. He says, for 4 hours a day, you'll work on the assembly line, and 4 hours up here in the office. We're going to groom you and manage you. So what happens is we'll train you that you can manage others. He says you'll get paid the exact same wage, no extra money, but you might have to work evenings, you might have to work overtime, you might have to work, weekends, you might have to travel. He goes, but for those of you who rise to the top, will have an opportunity that other people will always just dream and wish they had. You have 1 hour to make your decision. They gave 3x5 index cards, just like the Napoleon Hill Foundation people last night carried in their pocket. 1 hour goes by, and only 23 people said yes. The next day, 35 people showed up, card in hand, says, okay, we'll do it too. And I said, forget it. That opportunity's gone. We're looking for leaders, people that can step up to the occasion. If someone's hand gets caught in machinery, we don't want you to go home and think about it. We want people that are leaders. That opportunity is gone for the rest of your life. Now get back on the assembly line. But the 23 people that said yes, those are the ones that opened up all the dealerships and service stations around the United States, and not only became self-made multi-millionaires, but those are the grandkids that still own them generationally today.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow. Hey, Greg, I wanted to also ask you, tell us, there was a point in that film that I was watching on your website where you were going to visit Charlie Tremendous Jones, and you could tell that you were pretty emotional and that he had had a big impact in your life. Can you tell us a little bit about mentors and how important mentors are, some of the mentors you had, and the impact they've had on you?
Yeah, well, first of all, Charlie had a greatest quote of all time. It says, "We are the same today as we'll be in 5 years, except for the people we meet and the books we read." It's who you hang out with. It's what you put in your head that determines your character as a person. So in high school, if you hung around the smoking section, chances are you're a smoker. You hung around the jocks, you're a jock. Well, same thing goes to the content. If all we read is trash, magazines going through the grocery store, well, that's the dialogue that we usually play with our friends. If we're reading Think and Grow Rich and having conversations just like you put together here, Paul, well, then that's the dialogue that plays. And so the most important thing is to make sure that we hang out with the right people and put the right information into our craniums at each and every moment. And when it comes to mentorship, I believe that, we can have multiple mentors in our life. It's not always destined down to one person. So for example, my tennis coach, is a great tennis mentor. And I'm not going to ask him about my financial advice any more than I'm going to ask my accountant about my relationship. So it's okay to have multiple mentors in our existence. And by doing so, we also get viewpoints from multiple people that help our life grow exponentially.
Awesome. So true. So true. I had one guy ask me, well, what does your pastor, or we in our church we call it a bishop. What does your bishop think about, what you're doing? And I said, well, my bishop's a sheep farmer. I don't take financial advice from nothing wrong with sheep farmers, but just like you said, look for the right people. So. Let's see. Well, Greg, one of our format of this call is usually, this is a different call. Everyone usually, we have some thoughts. We go through Think and Grow Rich, we mastermind, and obviously a little bit different format. But a part of our call that's really powerful is the community of just amazing people. Would you be open to open up the lines here and just maybe field in a few questions?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. Awesome. Hey, friends, star 6, come on out. Who's first? Any thoughts or questions you wanna ask Greg?
Yeah.
Pat Simpson.
This is Karen.
Hey, Karen was first. Go ahead, Karen. Good morning.
Good morning. Greg, I read your book, and I was just absolutely blown away. It was absolutely phenomenal for me. Perfect timing, no coincidences. What was your biggest challenge writing that book? Getting yourself out of the way, obviously, but, moving through that.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet you. The honest answer is I'm not the best writer in the world. There's a huge difference between being an author and a writer, and it's kind of like telling people there's no Santa Claus, but here's the way it works. There's the name that goes on the book, that's the author. It's the person who writes the book, that's the writer, and sometimes they're different people. So what happened is I wrote the essence of 3 Feet from Gold. I wrote the skeleton. It was my story. However, I had to bring on Sharon Lecter to kind of rewrite the book to make it, a little bit more reader-friendly. And then we had an amazing ghostwriter come on to actually fill in the spaces. So for myself, the biggest learning experiences was going through that process in a very professional way so that we could make the most positive impact in the most amount of lives. And what was a blessing to that is it went to 21 countries, I think, in the first year, all over the world. And people that read it felt like it was written for them because they could relate to it. And like I said, people can't relate to a $1 billion success story, but people can relate to wanting to quit from time to time. So I'm glad it came along at the right time. And if there's anything I can do to be of service to you in any way, don't be a stranger.
Oh, thank you so much, because I'm attempting to write a book, and I keep getting stopped.
Well, I got you, and that's where a great, writer, ghostwriter, or copy editor, or bringing someone on is exact. That was my situation, and it's okay. So rather than get down on ourselves, what we do is bring on expertise. Napoleon Hill was a great leader of that. The whole secret for him was to work your strengths, hire your weaknesses. So if you have a weakness, just hire it out. It's still your message. It's still your project. It's still your words, but you got people that can actually breathe a little bit of life to it. All right? Is that good, Paul?
That's great. That's pure gold right there. There's a difference between being an author and a writer. Wow. Thank you, Greg. Thank you. And great question, Karen. Pass, I think you were next. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I just first of all wanted to say I'm so happy and grateful to be here. I love you guys, and I thank you, Paul, for being my mentor and bringing him to the line to teach us something again. My only question is, I'm big on vibrations right now. This has been, and I know, how do you stay? I know a lot of times my mentor, Paul, always talks about this attitude of gratitude, which I try to always keep. But how do you keep pushing when some of the negatives sometimes just bangs on you?
I've got the perfect answer for this. Remember, we are an exact reflection of the 5 people we hang around the most, and our attitude, our income and lifestyle is the exact average of that group. I'm going to say it again. We are an exact reflection of the 5 people we hang around the most, and our attitude, our income, and lifestyle is the average of that group. So for myself, when there was the negative things that would pour in, I realized I had some people in my life that I allowed to bring negativity in. So what happened is I made a conscious decision to only surround myself with the most positive, uplifting, solution-searching people, and by doing so, my vibration changed immediately. And understand this, we're realists. We can sit there and say, hey, there's a challenge, but we can do is face it. My mentor teaches this philosophy called illuminate. Instead of eliminate your negatives, you illuminate it. You put a spotlight on it. And by doing it, you can look for the solution. Rather than complain about it, we always look for a way out. And by having that mental attitude, that's what changed my vibration for myself and for my peers. And that's why I believe that we have a little bit more achievement than other people. So I recommend you look at the 5 people you're hanging around the most, and then make sure you're reaching out to people that can only encourage and uplift in a way that you can serve and bring back to others.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Great question, Pat. Thank you.
Hello?
Who was that?
Hello?
There was a lady there, I think.
My name is Jewel Moore.
Hi, Julie. Good morning.
Good morning. This is my very first time coming out and talking, but I just want to say real briefly to have brevity. Thank you so much, Greg.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
yeah, go ahead, Julie. You're loud and clear.
I actually just started reading the book. I've been listening to the audio tape some years ago with Dr. Kimbrough. But some kind of way, like you said, Paul, I began to ask God, what other material resources can I use along with me making this different transition in my life? And this book came up. And then today, to have you on to talk about opinion versus counsel, I was just reading an article last night with Brene Brown. And she said, if you are not in the arena, getting your face beat, getting dusted by life, you have nothing to tell me, period.
Yep, exactly.
And I wondered if that kind of related to what you said. And I'd like to also leave you with this, is that I'm a little nervous. This is my first time speaking on your show. But when I graduated from college some years ago, my first associate, Kathy Truitt, was the person who spoke to us. And I live in a very, very rural, small area. And to have that contact, and people throughout my life I've seen and have been in some type of sort of contact with them, I just know there's something higher and better. So to be able to have contact with this call, I appreciate it. I would like to ask you all, maybe you can elaborate on this today or another time. Do you believe that you can have mentors who may just be just like Paul? I don't know him. I just signed on weeks ago.
Let me answer this question. So
okay.
Absolutely, you're right. That's called virtual mentorship. And we all have virtual mentors. Napoleon Hill is not alive to, teach us today,
right.
But he did leave a lot of audios and videos and his incredible masterpieces behind. So we are getting mentorship from those people. So yes, the answer is you can have virtual mentorship, and you should seek it out all the time. And also understand this. If you're on this call, or if you're hanging out with people that are aspiring for greatness in their life, Les Brown always had the greatest line that says, you have greatness within you. And the secret is to fill your own cup first and then feed the world with what flows over. Meaning that we have to fill our own cup of success, our own foundation so strong that we can be the greatest form of ourselves so that we can serve mankind and other people. It's hard to be a raging alcoholic and tell someone else to quit drinking. So the whole thing is we owe it to ourselves. God wants us to be successful so that we can be a beacon of positive energy so other people will aspire and attract to what we have. So it's, right now, yes, virtual mentorships, absolutely. And guess what? It's your turn. For years
it is my turn. I totally agree. This is just awesome, in agreement, in alignment. I mean, to read this article last night, it was so amazing. And to hear you guys saying the same thing. And what she said is that there may be, at some point in your life, in your transition, you may not have the vocabulary for it at the moment. But when you're in mastermind groups such as this, it may come. That vernacular or that language you need to be able to express it. Because sometimes we'll say, oh, I got it, I hear you. But we may not be able to express what it is that we got. But when she wrote that, when you're in that arena, getting your face beat, you're doing something. Yeah. You can tell me something. You have experienced life. You have done it. Yeah. And so when you talked about that opinion versus counsel, I just think that's awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And you're spot on. Hey, Paul, can I tell the story about Evander Holyfield real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is for you, young lady. Okay, and this is for you, young lady, because this is what people always ask me what's one of my favorite interviews. And it was Evander Holyfield, the boxing legend. And I said, Evander, what makes you so special? And he says, I have a higher standard. I says, what do you mean? He goes, well, if you have a car and you will not tolerate it running bad or being dirty, you have a higher standard and a nicer car than your next-door neighbor. He goes, in sports, I showed up early, I left late, I invented exercises, I had a higher standard, I went the extra mile, and I won more championships than anyone in history. And he says, where could you be outside the ring, whether you're a pet groomer, stockbroker, insurance sales executive, and had a higher standard than your competition? And I said, but didn't it hurt being in a fight? He goes, God, yeah, it hurts. He goes, but when you're in a fight, you don't focus on the pain. You don't focus on the blows. As soon as you start focusing on the pain, you end up on your back knocked out. He goes, but that's what everyone else does outside the ring. They focus on the gas prices and war and economy, and they wonder why they never become a champion. And then he pulled me in really, really tight, and he says, you know what the funny thing is? He says, when you do win the championship, he said, everyone comes to their feet and they chant your name. They raise your hand in victory, and the guy puts a big shiny belt around your waist. And at that moment, at that second, you don't feel even one of the punches you took along your journey. But the guy in the losing locker room is going to feel every bruise for the rest of their life, wishing they had a higher standard. But the bottom line is this. I don't know you listening in, but I do know this about you. For the last few years, you've been taking care of your family. You've been taking care of your friends. You've been taking care of peers, coworkers. It's time to start taking care of us. It's your turn. It's time to draw an imaginary line in the sand and say, it's my turn. I'm going to start filling my own cup so full that I can feed the world with what flows over. It's my turn. It's time to be the best form of myself so that I don't fall into the signs of weakness and fear and shame and guilt and remorse and living in my past. I'm going to start living in the future, the beauty of what it holds. Because everyone on this call has got beauty. They got greatness within them. And I'd hope that there's any way that I can help pull some of that greatness out. I want you to know that I'm here to be of service. And my personal cell phone and my personal email. My personal cell phone is 858-353-0432. And my personal email is Greg, Greg, at bookgreg.com, BOOKGREG, Greg at bookgreg.com. That goes right to my cell phone, right to my iPhone. If there's anything I can ever do to be of service in any way whatsoever, don't be shy. I'm here to serve, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Paul, is there anything else you need from me?
You continue to blow me away, Greg. I've got 2 final questions for you, if that's okay.
Let's do it.
You mentioned filling your cup. Just out of curiosity, what do you do for personal development? What's your program? Can you just share with us what you do to grow on a daily basis?
Well, every day I read. I read the Bible every day. I read personal development every day. And I also stay in touch with my mentors. And, again, last night I'm having dinner with the board of directors, the actual Napoleon Hill's family, and the people running the thing. I mean, the whole thing is if we're hanging out with our poker buddies, or are we hanging out with that? Are we hanging out with people that inspire and uplift, or are we hanging out with people that, we're the smartest person in the room? So it's very important for me to hang out with people that are always encouraging, people that look at the bright side, people that look for solutions, solution-searching attitude. And then on the same note, from those solutions, share it. One of the greatest quotes from this guy named Oswald Chambers, he did a book called Utmost for His Highest. It says, if you're going to be used by God, he'll take you through a multitude of circumstances that aren't meant for you at all. They're meant to make you useful in his hands so that you won't be surprised when other people go across the same. So the whole thing is, it's what we go through, it's just been training. It's all been training. Now, the whole thing is take that information and start applying it so you don't repeat it, and that you help other people, you guide them along their journey so they don't feel so lost when they experience it too.
Just awesome, my friend, awesome. So books and people, just great stuff. Last question I have for you, Greg. You did mention string theory, and I for some reason I'd never heard of string theory, and as I looked into it a little bit, as I listened to you talk about it, wanted to ask you a question. One thing I am aware of is one of the books we study on this call is The Science of Getting Rich, and Wallace Wattles talks about formless substance. And Dr. Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich talks about, there's a point where he says, there's one thing that I do know, there is a power or a first cause that permeates every atom of matter. And then there's other, words like, quantum field and religion, the spirit. Does string theory relate to that? And is string theory some sort of maybe even scientific evidence, you could say, to back those ideas up? Are they related?
Well, I would agree. However, a theory is just a theory because it's impossible to prove. So no matter what, all it does is it backs the information that was supplied 100 years earlier and says, boy, isn't that interesting? It's kind of like Nikola Tesla was so far ahead of his time. Well, it's the same thing where we are right now finding from neuroscience. These top neuroscientists are coming out saying, gee, Napoleon Hill was right when he said this information about how the brain works and subconscious mind and how we can tap into the source. And it's very interesting to see how the scientific studies actually are proving a lot of those theories not to be theories anymore, but to be more evidential proof. So you're spot on. And by the way, people, again, I know, I don't know if I ever mentioned this or not, but, the way that I met Denise and I met Paul's, I do this very private event called Secret Knock. There's no email or website or phone number. There's not a flyer or anything like that. It's an invite only. It's like the cool kid party in school. And the next one's going to be in August, and we actually have the president and CEO of Napoleon Hill Foundation flying in to do a presentation and hang out. And then in October, we're going to release Think and Grow Rich Stickability, and we really would appreciate your support for the Napoleon Hill Foundation to get that message out to as many people as possible. Believe it or not, Napoleon Hill and the foundation have never had a New York Times best-selling book because Think and Grow Rich was out 5 years before the list started. So it is my journey. It's my intention. And if you guys join me on this mastermind, is I want to make Think and Grow Rich Stickability the first New York Times best-selling book the Napoleon Hill Foundation has ever had. And that's what we were talking about yesterday at the board of directors meeting at dinner last night is how can we get this out to the most people? How can we spread this message to so many like-minded folks that it ignites and starts a movement so that people will go back and start reading the original text and be inspired just like you guys are today?
Awesome. We'll definitely join you in that, Greg. One thing I wanted to do real quick, usually at the start of the call we open up the lines and let everyone scream out, and for some strange reason I forgot to do that. So I want to ask you guys a question. If you're excited about the content, if you're grateful to Greg, if you're excited about learning and growing and being here on this call and moving forward in your lives in a powerful way, I'm going to open up the lines, my friend. Let's express some gratitude to Greg here as I open up the lines right now. I'm bummed I didn't do that at the start of the call because that brings so much energy. Greg, I think you were a hit, my friend.
Thank you. That was so great. And thank you so much for having me. And, again, any way I can be of service, don't be a stranger. I appreciate all you do to make this world a better place, Paul, and thank you very much. I got to get going to my normal day, and you guys keep smiling, okay?
All right, Greg, thanks a lot. You have a great day. And my friends, my Think and Grow Rich family, let's get out there and let's live the Think and Grow Rich way. Focus on your major definite purpose. Take massive action today. Plow through temporary setbacks, and whatever you do, my friends, never give up on your dreams. I love you guys. We'll be back here tomorrow morning jumping into the sixth sense is the topic for tomorrow's call. Get out there, make it a great day. Take care, and bye for now.